Hey Synthwaver, Alonso here. In this video, I'm going to analyze 5 iconic riffs by the great band The Midnight, so you can learn from them and apply what you've learned in your own music. At the end, I'll be creating 1 or 2 riffs of my own with what we've learned, so you can see how to put this into action. Get your free account at synthwavedojo.com today so you can watch my videos neatly organized and without ads. Let's do this. Before we start, I want to mention 2 things. First, that I chose these riffs because they're present in some of the Midnight's most famous songs. Second, that I transposed all the riffs into the key of C major or A minor just to make things easier on ourselves. First up, we have the riff for Los Angeles, which is in the tempo of 116 BPM, and it sounds like this. Okay, now all these riffs, I'm going to present them by showing you the MIDI, and also I'm going to have bass notes playing underneath as reference, the same as with the kick drum that's going on, that's playing every quarter note. Great. So Los Angeles, some of the notes that I captured for this riff are that you can think of this as a Triad Over Root technique, playing the tonic major. Triad Over Root, I've talked about it a few times now, and I have a couple of videos about it, and it's when you play the same triad, for example, C major, C, E, G, on top of a changing bass line, like you go from A to G to F, back to G, you play the same triad over a changing bass line, and that creates a very colorful progression. Okay, so the riff for Los Angeles, you can think of it as putting your right hand on the piano here, where you have C major would be C, E, G. Okay, so you have your 5 fingers on one on each of these notes, and you simply holding that position or keeping your hand there, you find some notes within this range of 5 notes that you like and create your riff. Okay, so that's why it's a Triad Over Root, because it's staying within the same, it's a tonic major chord position. Now, it's also an ostinato motif. An ostinato is a persistent rhythmic pattern. In this case, it's also a motif because we're creating a bit of a melodic idea that has a rhythmic pattern, okay? And we can consider that this pattern is rooted on the tonic major of the chord or of the key, in this case C, okay? And it's comprised or made up of 16th notes. For example, like so. We do C, G, C, F, C3. Well, in the appropriate rhythm. In whatever notes we play, we always start with C, go to another note, come back to C. That's why I say or describe this pattern as being rooted with C, because it always keeps coming back to the C. And you'll see that this idea, the Midnight uses it a lot. What else can we tell about this pattern? Well, it's 1 bar long. This is important. The entire progression is 8 bars long, as you can see here. Okay, but they play the same pattern that lasts for 1 bar 8 times in a row. It never changes. That's also interesting. And in terms of the pitches that they're using the 1, the 3, the 4, and the 5th degrees of the major scale. And the combination of the 3rd and the 4th with the 1 and the 5, they achieve tension and resolution as they go along. For example, if they had only used the 1 and the 5, there's no tension here. But by including the 4, the 4th degree of the scale, that one introduces tension that then is resolved when we come back to the root. Okay, So this is a very simple pattern, just 1 bar long, using 4 notes in values of, or subdivisions of 16th notes. And whatever we do, we're starting with the root note, and then we go off to another note and come back to the tonic, right? So let's play it once more. The rhythmic pattern is ba 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 ba. This pattern has a lot of syncopation, notes on the offbeats or in between the beats. That's also very important. And you'll find this on a lot of the midnight music and riffs, that they know how to create a nice combination between notes landing on the downbeats and on the upbeats, which creates this syncopation, and it's very interesting to listen to. Great. Next up, we have Sunset. Sunset is in the tempo of 114 BPM, which I have already set up in my DAW. It sounds like this. Great. This pattern, or this riff, is also syncopated, meaning that there are notes playing on the offbeats, and in this riff, all the notes only play on the offbeats, which is very syncopated. We can consider it also an ostinato motif because it's a persistent rhythm. Bum, 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 that never changes. It's the same rhythm over and over again. And it is a motif because it has a certain pattern in terms of the pitches that it is following. And it's very interesting that it is played twice with a variation the second time. So this is the first one. It ends on the top G. But the second time around, it ends on the bottom G. So it's practically the same pattern repeated with a variation, which is very powerful. This pattern uses the 2nd, 3rd, and 5th, and the 6th degrees of the scale, which, as we saw with Los Angeles, serves to introduce tension and release. This riff has something very interesting, and it's that, let me mute these notes here. Let's take a listen. This is the riff with the pure melodic notes. But what they do here is they harmonize or play another note with doubling the riff, but this note always stays being C. So we can think of harmonizing with the C note, like so. And that gives the riff more flavor. All right. Another thing that I wanted to point out is that the riff really starts before the beat, and this is called Anacrusis. As you see here, it starts before the beat, not on the beat. Great. Next up, let's take a look at Days of Thunder in the tempo of 162. And this is a 4-bar riff. Did I mention that Sunset is also a 4-bar riff? Don't remember. Well, I just mentioned it. Right. So this is Days of Thunder. Great. This riff is based on the Boys of Summer arpeggio by Don Henley. Boys of Summer is a world-famous, legendary song from the 80s. I think it's 1984 or 1986 by Don Henley, the former singer of the great band classic rock band, the Eagles. And on Boys of Summer, you have this persisting arpeggio. And the song goes like this, if I remember correctly. Okay, so this riff by the Midnight is based off Don Henley's Boys of Summer arpeggio. And from a musical standpoint, you can consider the riff or the Boys of Summer arpeggio as playing the 1 here, the 7, and the 5. So this is the first degree of the scale, the 7th degree of the scale, and the 5th degree of the scale, with a very particular rhythm that is also very syncopated. We can also think of this riff as starting from a triad over root technique. But in this case, instead of, let's say, starting from the root position of G, which would be these 3 notes, we're playing the second inversion of C, which is G, C, E. So if I put my hand on the second and play the second inversion, G, C, E, you see here that in between my first and my third finger, I have these notes. So the arpeggio is simply this. Still from this second inversion position, I can just play with the notes and see what I can find. Which is very likely how both the Midnight and Don Henley came up with this arpeggio. All right. And finally, you can also consider this as an ostinato because it's a persistent rhythm. Bum, 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 but that never changes, but with a variation at the end. Don Henley's Boys of Summer has no variation at the end. It's just the same thing played over and over. The Midnight, I believe, just to distance themselves a little bit from Don Henley's, although they can't escape that, decided to include this little turnaround or figure towards the end to go back to the 1. Very effective and very simple. Great. Next up, let's take a look at Vampires. Vampires is in the tempo of 115. And what I'm going to show you guys here is the sax riff. Okay, this riff is very simple, and if you listen to it on the Midnight's original track, the sax has some expressive notes that aren't easy for me to show here. It has like some slides or some legato techniques there, but in any case, most of the important bits are here. So let's talk about this sax riff. We can dissect this riff and think of it as 2 rhythmic motifs with a variation. So this is the first motif. Okay. Then we repeat this rhythmic motif, but different pitches. Okay. So in essence, we have the same rhythmic motif played twice. And then we have a new motif here. So back from the top. And here like a turnaround or a figure to go up to the 1. Very similar to, was it Vampires? No, to Days of Thunder. Great. From a musical perspective, all these notes or tones played in this riff are a combination of chord tones and non-chord tones, again, to have, to present tension and release in the music. We can also appreciate here that this first motif starts somewhere, plays a rhythmic pattern, but then on the next bar, it's like we're starting from a lower position, then we play a rhythmic pattern, and on the third bar, we start yet from a lower position. So it seems like we could say the shape of this riff is going down on every bar. And certainly appreciate here how much space there is in this riff. Okay, part of that is because the saxophone player will have to breathe and prepare for the next round of the riff, but also I'm sure it has to do with giving the listener time to enjoy this riff and to take it all in. If it had been a constant barrage of notes, it's harder to take it all in and just feel what's going on. So let's play it one more time. Here we rest, a lot of space. Once more with the riff. Great. And our final riff for today is the Comeback Kid. It's in the tempo of 118. Let me see where we are. These have to be active. Great. So this is the Comeback Kid. Oh, hold on. It's a 8-bar riff. Great. The Comeback Kid riff, you can also write a riff like this using a Triad Over Root approach and the tonic major. Check this out. If I place my hand the same as I have done before and play the root note, play the C major chord in root position, I would play this note, and this note. And we have these notes in between. Now check this out. All of the notes played in the Comeback Kid are inside of this 5-finger position, starting from this Triad Over Root technique. Very cool. It is also syncopated. Most of the notes land on the offbeats or on syncopated places, not on the downbeats. So it makes it very lively, like it's always moving forward. And just like with Los Angeles, remember that this riff, we would go to certain notes, but always keep coming back to C. That's why we said this. We could consider this like a riff rooted on C. It's the same thing with the Comeback Kid. Check this out. We play C, we go to G, play C, then D, C, G. So it's like the same idea as Los Angeles. We play C, go somewhere else, come back to C, go somewhere else, come back to C. Like we keep coming back to this one same note. So this is why I call it's rooted, in this case, in C. We could have rooted our riff or pattern on whatever other note that we chose. It's not because it's the root of the chord or the tonic of the scale. Great. And it's also played in 16th notes. However, as opposed to Los Angeles, this is a 2-bar pattern. Whereas Los Angeles was a 1-bar pattern repeated over and over again. The Comeback Kid is 2 bars. And it never changes, the same as with Los Angeles. It repeats over and over and over again. There is no variation here. And this riff uses the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th degrees of the scale to introduce tension and resolution internally as the notes roll along. So this is very cool as well. Let's hear it one more time. Great. Now, taking a look at all of these riffs, what commonalities can we find? What techniques are they using and reusing? What from all of this can we use in our own tracks? So one thing that comes to mind is using a triad over root technique, which they used here once, twice, thrice. So if you want to come up with some kind of riff, you can simply, well, I'll get into that later, but use a triad over root on the tonic major of the key, in this case, C major, and then trying to find some notes from there. Another very important characteristic is that these riffs tend to be mostly ostinatos, or the same repeating and persistent rhythmic pattern, right? These aren't real melodies per se. These are mostly riffs, like you would hear on a in a rock and roll band, and some kind of riff-based song played by a guitarist. So they're repeating, and they have a very interesting rhythm by nature. Okay. Another thing is, for the most part, all of these riffs are 1 or 2 bars long. Again, it's not, none of these are melodies, so it's not like they're gonna last 3 or 4 bars. It's either 1 or 2 bars repeated to fill up 4 or 8 bars. So very short, right? Let's see what else. Oh, and they tend to use not only notes from the, let's say, the triad over root, which are the 1, 3, and 5, but they find ways of incorporating the second, the fourth, and maybe even the 6th degrees of the scale, again, to create some tension inside the riff. Because if all you did was play the, let's say, the 1, the 3, and the 5 from the tonic major, like so, the riff is very boring, so you need to incorporate other tones, other non-chord tones, or other more colorful tones from the scale to really make this come alive. So that's another idea. And let me see if there was anything else. Okay, make sure to leave room between the notes. Leave space, use space. Let's see what else. Another idea is variation. So create a riff, let's say that's 1 bar long, and instead of playing it 4 times in a row, repeating it, introduce a little bit of variation to the end of it and play that on the 2nd or the 4th bars. Now let's see if we can apply this to our music right here on the spot. Let's see if we can find something that works. Let's put this to the test. All right, so I'm going to use the comeback kid chords, which is a simplified version that I have here from the progression, but it doesn't matter. In any case. Okay, so let's say I have this track, this progression in my track, and I want to come up with something that could sound like it was written by the midnight. So putting to the test all of these ideas that I just showed you. So the first thing I would do is think of a triad over root technique. So here I'm gonna lay my hand on my MIDI controller, and I'm gonna use this, the C major chord as my triad as the bass changes, like so. I'm only playing C major. Now, but of course, let me try to find a riff, not just playing chords on the downbeats. Okay, another thing that we learned from the midnight is that we can use the 2nd and 4th degrees of the scale. Also, that we can create a pattern that's rooted on 1 note, and also to find some kind of persistent rhythmic pattern. In our case, let's try to come up with something rhythmic. Maybe, let's see. Okay, so playing the notes found inside the C major chord root position with these other color notes. What about this? works, right? And maybe we could introduce variation the second time around or the fourth one, like so. That's one idea. Another idea would be, let's not base the whole thing still with the Triad Over Root idea, but let's have it be rooted on a different note. For example, the G. So I'm going to play notes in this position, but keep coming back to G. And for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to do a similar rhythm to what I just did. Nice. Works very well. So we tried the Triad Over Root thing. We tried to do a persistent motif. We introduced variation. What ideas from here haven't we covered yet? I think we've covered them all. And just for fun, okay, you know what? Let's do something that isn't so much an ostinato pattern going on and on. Something like the riff to Days of Thunder? Kinda. Let's see. Repeat. Very cool, very simple. Here I just tried to leave a little bit of space and go beyond the starting Triad Over Root technique and just play some simple notes there, and I was just improvising and it sounded really good. Really good. All right, my friends, that's all I had for today. I hope you found this useful. Try out these techniques, come up with your own riffs, and let me know how it goes. Take care.